Great, thank you. I'm Kevin Delaney. I'm the editor of Quartz, which is a business news site. We're the sister news organization of The Atlantic, and hopefully you all received an email from us this morning, and we'll receive it tomorrow. We're at qz.com. So we're going to, first of all, I should say, Paul, this film is remarkable. Congratulations to you and your colleagues. And it's out in full. It's out at full feature length in 2017. Okay, great. So I'm going to start by asking Charles a few questions, and then we're going to focus in a little bit with Lynn and with George also on the what works for serving vulnerable children, which is ultimately the focus of this film. Before I do, I wanted to also acknowledge someone else, one of the other stars of the film, who is in the room, who's Esther Muli, who is right here. There are moments where it's heartbreaking, but the film is surprisingly funny. And I think that's thanks to your spirit and your children as well. I want to start with a few questions to you, Charles. How does it feel just watching this film? I was thinking, how would it feel to have your personal story told like this? How do you feel about this, watching yourself there?
I don't know whether I would say funny.
It feels funny, yeah.
Yes, but I see really the hand of God who has walked with me all the years since I was born, and when I did business, and after that, now giving it all for the sake of the very poor children. So when I look at it, I see the journey, and then it reminds me of great, great things past, troubles, anger, all these things. So there is always mixed feeling as I see and I look at it.
How many children are in your care now?
Over 3,151. All children, boys and girls, 40%. Boys and 60% girls. It's a big, big, big family.
It is definitely a very big family. How do you decide which services to offer? As you watch the film, you realize it goes from. Excuse me. This is the only one I need. It's okay. You can do. Thank you. How do you decide which services to offer? Watching the film. We see it starts with a bed and a meal and some washed clothing, and then, pretty soon you're in hydroponic farming and karate and teams. And how do you decide where it stops and where it starts and where it stops?
Since I was born in a very, very poor family. And my dad was very violent as well as poor situation. When I became a businessman, I learned so many things out of problem, out of lack of food and many things. And so when I get children from the street, then I know exactly where they can suit, and that's why we have many programs that encourage them to join. For example, sports and games for those who have been addicted to drugs, alcoholism, prostitution, and so forth. You have to make them busy. And then again, for those who are better, then there is education, right from nursery, kindergarten, primary school, and then we have also high school and vocational training, the college, and so forth. So I know exactly this one fits to this area, and there is no end.
Yeah. One question I have just watching the film, one of my personal reactions, when you're out at night looking for kids, how are you knowing that they're orphaned or abandoned by their family?
Truly, when you walk at night and find the homeless children and some of those who have been really so much abused, then you have a heart. I usually feel these children, this child really need a rescue, and I cannot leave that such a child behind. It's because of the love that I have for those children and the feeling that I felt many, many years ago when I was young. So that one is a special spirit that determines what I should do at that particular time.
Great. Okay. I'm gonna shift to Lynn and to George. I also want to say that we're going to take questions, any questions that you have, and so we'll talk a little bit, and then we'll turn it over to the group, and we'll also get you out on time. I've been warned that that is also a priority. So, Lynn, I want to pull you in. You're the CEO of SOS Children's Villages, and can you start by talking about some of the services you're providing and what your approach is?
First, I just want to say, wow, that's absolutely amazing. I think I'm going to steal part of the movie, Paul, if you don't mind, and take it around with me, because a lot of times when we're trying to explain what SOS Children's Villages looks like, it's hard to explain exactly what we do, because SOS also provides homes for orphan and abandoned children. So a lot of what we do looks exactly like what Dr. Muli does. We probably looked a lot like that 60 years ago when we started, and now we're in 134 countries, providing the similar types of services. So the growth that you're seeing in his movie is something that we've experienced as well. And I think the idea that providing children with this basic safety, loving home, a parent that cares for them is really a model that you can ramp up around the world. And it does really work. And we have a lot of the children, like Dr. Muli, who lead very successful lives after this. And similar to Dr. Muli, they really do want to give back. For example, I was just in Cambodia this past year, and I got to actually spend a week in the village, which I usually don't get to do. And so I was hanging out, and there was a 2-year-old boy named Lamong who I met. And I usually don't get to meet them that young, but Lamong was a hysterical little boy, very rambunctious, was running around laughing like any little kid would. And I found out that he'd only been at SOS for about 2 months. And in his short 2 years, he had already lost his mother. His father was an alcoholic and was letting the neighbors in the apartment building take care of him. And then when the neighbors moved out, the dad took him out to the farm and let the grandmother try and raise him. And then that didn't work either. So he was eventually brought to SOS Children's Villages, along with his 3 older brothers and sisters. So they were now all there at SOS. Tita, who was 5, was his older sister, and then he had 2 older sisters. So when I met him at 2 months later, he was a happy kid, running around, totally experiencing childhood like any kid that age should. And also calling, and I think Mommy Muli, is that right? How do we do this? Mother Muli knows, calling his SOS mother Mom. And he had already attached to her and already felt safe. And once you give a child that, they can really start to survive and relive or get back the childhood that they were losing.
And your model is similarly wraparound services, right?
Exactly. So I like how Dr. Muli explained it, because intuitively we also adapt programs based on the community. So while we're in Ethiopia and we're dealing with families and children who have HIV and who are trying to deal with disease management, we adapt the programs to suit those families. And then if we're in Cambodia, there were a lot of malnutrition issues with our kids. So the wraparound services that we provide can be very grassroots and adaptable toward the communities where we're working.
And your work is with children, but also with families. You've expanded.
Right. Yeah. So we have 80,000 children in care right now, and there are over 1 million children in this world who are orphaned and abandoned. That's a lot of children. So the other way that we're growing right now is by working with families in the community. And if we can prevent abandonment, if we can try and strengthen the families before they have to lose their kids, so whether it's poverty, dealing with disease, abuse. We actually have villages in Illinois and Florida, and unfortunately in the United States, the reason parents lose their kids here is more of an abuse issue. So whatever those programs are, or whatever the reason that's troubling that family, we can adjust our programs to make sure that they're trying to strengthen that issue within the community and work with the family so they don't have to give up their children.
George, so Building Tomorrow, can you talk about your model's a little bit different, but you're working in Uganda. Can you tell us how the model works?
Yeah, at first I just need to express my appreciation to Dr. Muli, not only for what we just saw in the last 40 minutes, but the fact he's been doing this for 27 years and has a lot more hair than I do. I have to tip my hat off to you. Building Tomorrow's work is mainly in education, and we work in very rural communities. We seed new primary schools. But something very similar to what we saw in the movies, we really believe that you create change through people. And so we've recently started a fellowship program where we invest in Ugandan college graduates, and we put them in rural communities for 2 years to help integrate with the community and integrate with head teachers and help ensure that schools in very rural communities can still offer quality education for those kids who oftentimes have come from backgrounds very similar to what we saw earlier.
And so your focus is very much on education. How do you determine where to start and end services, which potentially could reach to a very broad spectrum?
Yeah, for us, it's very similar to what you've heard already. And I think there's a theme here, which is we listen to the community. If you go in and you think that you know what the solution is going to be, I think you're setting yourself up for failure. But we are very attentive to what our communities say in terms of what's important, what's necessary, and we found that embedding one of our staff members, not only through the construction process of a school, but also through the first 2 years of its existence, is really crucial to help the community figure out how they too can galvanize and sustainably support that school long term.
Can you talk about your relation to the government? I'm going to ask each of you what the relation is and how important that is. George, maybe you start.
Yeah, you made people uncomfortable up here. No, we believe, so if just a statistical overview, there are 250 million kids in the world who've spent 1,000 days in school and can't read, write, or do basic math. And that's a really staggering number. And for us, we really feel like we need to be working in concert with the Ministry of Education, also the Ministry of Finance, to be able to carry out all the activities that we do. So at our close to 50 schools now, all of our teacher salaries are funded through the government, and that's something that we've really worked hard to do because we feel like that's necessary. And we also we do a lot of self-funding of some of the fellowship work and so forth we do to help invest in the human capital that runs those schools. But we really feel like that link and basically the public-private partnership, which is a lot of the platform that we hear here at CGI, is super key to helping drive that change.
Charles, what's the Muli Children's Family? Is there a connection with the Kenyan government?
Oh, yes.
Support.
Yes, thank you. Muli Children's Family works with the Kenyan government many times because of the children when we get them and they are in the street and from the rural areas, from the slums, we have to get consent from the government. And therefore we work with the judicial as well as the children's department to ensure that we have a good report with the government. And therefore, in case of anything that might come along that we may not be involved into children trafficking. And of course, we work with the people in the communities, women fellowship, as well as men, and the different groups of people whom we work together with. And some of the organizations that are linked to MCM Children Family, as they also come and share their wisdom, understanding, but also they learn more about what we are doing. And let me take you just a little bit back on the children whom we deal with. They are the most vulnerable children who have no parents, children who have got no home, children who have been abused completely, and therefore we give them shelter, food every day. We give them food every day. Then clothing, education, and then love. As parents, we love them, we counsel them, and then we have a spiritual nourishment, which is very, very important because it makes them to change from their behaviors, psychosocial, support to them, and no children who pays school fees, because this should be known. 100% of everything, food and education, textbooks, no child pays school fees, and therefore, because it's not a place to make money. However, we have sustainability program. This sustainability program is about farming. Africa has been completely neglected. Why? It's because a lot of what we call handout, little there, like feeding them with the fish. I came up with a model, and this model started right from the grassroots, training them to work, because we have created job opportunities for more than 500 people, up to 1,300, and at the same time creating social economic change and development. And then the other thing is about social justice in the way that the women who have been so abused, training the police force and those agencies about the rights of women, and as well as the right of children. And therefore, that one we do by inviting these policemen, and we organize conferences for them, and then we meet those, cost. And finally, on the same, is about the building a desk in those police stations, where the government has given us really that consent to build, so that those young women and the old women who has been abused sexually, beaten by men, they can report. Because before there was nothing like that. Women are let down, and therefore Muli Children Family, one of the agendas, it's to stand for the rights of women, because we know women are the pillars of a family. I've seen it from my wife, and therefore I've seen it also from my daughters. We have worked together with them as a family, and a family cannot really continue without a woman, and that is so. And yes, so something that I also wanted to say is about the climate change initiative. Yeah. That one is like, you cannot rehabilitate people unless the climate, the environment is conducive. Yeah. And therefore, with that integrated together, water conservation, water harvesting, and a renewable energy that also we do, that makes it the MCF a tool that is reaching to Kenyans, to Africa, and the entire world. And that's why we have many people who keeps on coming, flying all the way from China, from Hong Kong, from Norway, from Germany, and even from USA. You are not spared at all. And therefore, they come, and I welcome you. Yeah. And my brother, when you are crossing to Uganda, please stop off at Kenya MCF.
That's great. So there are a few important themes in what you said there that I want to talk about specifically. So one is preparing children for actually leaving your care. So the youth employment, basically, that question. There's also sustainability, how you can build that into this. And the third thing is clearly special focus on girls and women as a population. We're going to focus on each of those, but I wanted to make sure I understood. You've worked with the police department to have a desk in the police stations specifically for women to report domestic crimes. Is that right?
Right. It is more the women, the treatment that they get from men, or mostly when the girls are in the streets, they don't get that good share of love. Yeah. It turns the other way around. And therefore, when they report, to the police, then the police they like mock them. They laugh. Did you enjoy it? Those kind of questions which are really not good. And that's what MCF, Muli Children Family, we are trying to do away with it, because we want to build a strong family. That's why we call ourselves family, but not a home. It's not an organization. It is family. And this family model with the farming, with the rehabilitation of the young people, counseling them, loving them, and seeing them excel in their life, empowering them. That will make a difference in this world we live.
Great. I want to ask you, Lynn and George, about this question of preparing children to actually leave your care, and what your approach is, what your strategy is there.
Sure. So similar to Dr. Muli, I think, similar to what he does, the idea that the community and really involving the community in what you do, and George said the same thing, is really, really essential. If you work with the community for a long period of time and you understand what kind of challenges that they have, and then you can offer solutions for ways to improve them, whether it's domestic abuse, if it's drug use, whatever it is. So once you start to make the community stronger, the children stronger, those two things go together. And part of that is making sure that each child has a plan. So like Dr. Muli said, is it sports that they're interested when they're young? Is it painting? When I went to Ethiopia and visit a village, our homes in Ethiopia have this wonderful children's senate. So there's a representative of every house. And they get together once a month and meet, and they talk about the issues in the village that they like and things that they wish would get better. And then two of the representatives from the village convene once a year in Ethiopia and talking about, as a country, how can they improve their village. So the children are involved very early on in the outcomes and the things that they think are important. And I got a chance to interview this group of senators of this village, and I asked each of them what they wanted to be when they grew up. And I heard journalist, I heard astrophysicist, I heard a lot of journalists, a lot of doctors. I think the other thing that's very similar is a lot of these children, they come out of this situation and they're very grateful, and they actually feel like they're the lucky ones, and they want to give back. And I think you see that in the movie, and it's the same way with our children. They really want a chance to thank the community because that's how they look at us, and they want a chance to give back.
It's very good to see that they're children who believe in a future for journalism. We're very,
Go to Africa to get it.
We have to leave the country for that, to leave the United States. You mentioned a few times, Lynn, community, and are there other types of organizations that you find yourself working with that are not, apart from putting the government aside, are there other types of organizations that are effective allies for this?
Yeah, I mean, because we are so entrenched in the community, we work with a lot of community-based organizations. So the SOS villages don't look at it similar, again, that this is a third party that came into their country and is implementing a program and going to leave. That's not how it happens. In order to build an SOS Children's Villages, the community really has to buy in up front, because they're going to be the ones running the village. All the mothers that work for us are all from the local community. The national director is from the community. So in order to keep the village running, become self-sustainable, we work with the community-based organizations to then work on what bigger issues do we need to solve in this community. So whether it's vocational programs for the parents so that they can take care of themselves. Again, when I was in Ethiopia, one of the women that I met unfortunately had just lost her husband from AIDS. She was very sick herself, and she was not able to take care of her son anymore. And she was talking to us about bringing her son to SOS. And instead of taking her son, we worked with her on getting her healthy, getting her back on her AIDS medicine so that she was able to take care of her son. We have a daycare program in this community, so she was able to enroll her son in our daycare, and she went to vocational program, earned a skill, and was now able to take care of her son and therefore not have to lose him. And she told me that with the money that she used, she bought a tin roof for her house, which was an improvement over the tarp that she had. And she was very, very proud of that. And I think looking at those opportunities in each of the communities that we serve, that could really, really make a difference.
Great. We're going to go in 2 minutes. We're going to go to any questions. So if you have questions, we'll come to you very shortly. George, I want to turn to you, and there are kind of two questions that we've been talking about. One is preparing children for employment, for success in life beyond the moment at which they're intersecting with you. And the second one is the organizations and structures in the community that you find are most successful to ally with, and you can dive in.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. What I love being on this panel is I think these two organizations have really figured out how you can do things on a very holistic level and kind of provide a lot of services and go really deep. And what we've kind of the route that we've chosen, our theory of change at Building Tomorrow, is one that has us really focusing on the education piece and really trying to make sure that we do as good a job as we possibly can. And then inviting other organizations who do really good work in health and in agriculture and other sectors to come in alongside of us and kind of amplify the impact that's already being made. And so that's kind of how we've approached that. What I would say to you is one of our biggest challenges, I think, is thinking about what comes next, because unfortunately in Uganda right now, the dropout rate between those who start first grade and then finish seventh grade is over 71%. And so the conversation that we have oftentimes is actually more centered around how do we keep kids in school. And I think a lot of the answers, are coming here. It's not a silver bullet. There's a lot that has to happen. But we really believe that we've got to, we're big believers in vocational education. We have a lot of our students who go on to vocational training programs, which we think are super. And on the side of our fellows, one of the biggest things we hear from parents when we say, what do you want to see for your child? They oftentimes have a hard time imagining why they should send their kid to school, because just under 70% of college degree holders in Uganda are unemployed 2 years after they've finished their studies. So a lot of it for us is about entrepreneurship and kind of being the Dr. Muli before he went the MCF way, right? And starting all those businesses and figuring out what you can do to better your community. That's a lot of what we try to bring to not only our students and community, but our fellows as well.
Yeah, and just one more thing on that. Since we're at CGI, the other very important part of this is the corporations that also want to work with us and the foundations, because what we do is try and find corporations like at CGI who are interested in our work and also want to provide vocational opportunities, training, jobs eventually. And so organizations like the Marriott and Western Union, who we've met through CGI, are very interested in how to expand in those parts of the world. That's where they work. They want to give back to those communities. And it's not just a donation. It's about training, skills, and then eventually giving jobs. And that's also a critical partner like these other organizations are.
Great. Okay. We're going to shift to the room. Charles, you have something?
Perhaps, I wanted
and then we're going to go to questions.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to make a comment on the way forward for Muli Children Family is preparing to build a university. And this university will cater more for many causes that would really help the continent, in terms of climate change, water conservation, about agriculture that is so much needed, and many other causes like entrepreneurship. And through that, then my philosophy and ideology, and my really believe, what I believe is that all things are possible, that we can move forward, particularly when we have determination and remain focused in what we do. This university will be able to help young people in Africa and all over the world, those who would like to come and be able to learn more how we can change this world one person at a time. And that's what I'm really praying, that God will raise men and women, will raise even organizations such as SOS that we have never ever before partner together, and it is possible. I see the universe coming in. And I have 81 at the moment already that are studying. This is the second year since we started. And by faith, we look forward within the next 2 years that we have the charter. So that is what I...
That's great. So coming next, Muli Children's University, MCF University.
Yes, it is called Muli International University.
Great. Excellent. So we have a few minutes left, and we'd love to get your reactions or questions from the room here. And if you can do we have microphones? Or we do have microphones. So if you can just raise your hand if you have a question or comment. It would be great if you could say your name and your organization you're affiliated with, if there is one, before your question. Yeah, we'll start back there.
Hi, my name is Joe Livingston. I'm with Project Cure. We're a health system strengthening organization. We've done a lot of work in Kenya. Thank you, Muli. I mean, it was incredibly moving and impressive to hear your story. And I think one of the things that's so moving about it is that it comes from your own sense of experience, from your own personal experience, and it's really a homegrown, grassroots organization. But I'm sure as you're expanding and as you've done all these big things and as your future knows no bounds in terms of the extent that you'll take this, and given all of the needs of so many people who haven't yet had the advantage that the kids have in your family, I wonder about how you build partnerships and what you look for in the types of partners that you seek, kind of what the challenges might be and what's a good fit. Because I'm sure there's a lot of people in this room and around who are very interested in doing what they can to support the good work that you've done.
Yep. Thank you very much. One of the things, challenge that is on our side in Africa, as you know, most of the time we depend from the Western world, and to get those kind of people is not easy, and therefore it needs people to understand. And through the movie that my brother Paul Boffin, who is going to be the distributor of the movie, will be able to reach to many people, and those people will have one word or one goal, and that is to improve the lives of women in Africa, to improve education, and further the university that will be coming already, the professors coming from different places in America, in China, everywhere, those who will come qualified to come and teach. And so those are some of the challenges that we are still praying and trusting that God will connect us with the right people at the right time. That's one.
Just a quick question. George, can you just build on that and talk about, maybe I'd only heard a little bit about how your organization partners with, or just so we can get a...
Yeah, I mean, I think, so as I mentioned earlier, our really big focus is the community development aspect and the education piece as well. And so one of the great benefits of being at a place like CGI is that everyone has their cause, everyone has their mission, everyone has something that they're really good at. And for us, that's the community mobilization piece, and it's getting communities to really invest in sustainable education in their own backyard. And what we look for are ways that we can amplify our impact in those communities across the board. So we're looking for organizations, let's say, who do clean water and can help provide that, because we know it's a really big driver of attendance for kids at school. Healthcare, a lot of the things that you've seen in this in the piece are obviously really critical for a community and a child to have that in their ecosystem. And so for us, we're always willing and open to have conversations around who we might be able to bring into our portfolio and work with in our communities.
Thank you, Baba Muli. That's a great story, and good to hear it being told. So congratulations to the whole team. Lynn, I actually had a question for you. There's been a lot of work done recently on both the successes and the challenges of institutional orphanages, and with SOS kind of being the largest entity in this space. I was wondering from your perspective, what does the future look like for SOS and for the industry as a whole?
Thanks for that question. I could have planted that one. The SOS model is individualized homes. So we really are, the old model is a village. So if you think of 10 to 12 homes in a village, or we have villages in Illinois and Florida, so 10 to 12 homes in a cul-de-sac, and 6 to 8 children per house. So they really are individual families. We don't split up boys and girls. A lot of the children that come to us are siblings, and these families have already been broken apart, so the worst thing to do is to pull these brothers and sisters further apart, like they would be in a typical orphanage. So we keep sibling groups together, and then they get the addition of extra SOS siblings. So I think one of the things that has worked so well for us, and in Illinois and Florida, our parents are actually foster care parents. And so they go through all of the foster care training that we do by state. It changes by state in this country. But then on top of it, they get SOS training. So the mothers get specific training on how to deal with children who've been through trauma, how to deal with children in crisis. So there's extra training that goes into this. And then they have the women and the parents. We actually have some SOS dads now out in the world. They have each other to rely on. And I'm sure that's similar to Muli's community, is that it does really take a community for these children. And so if they're having a challenging day with one of their kids, they have somebody next door that they can talk to who's going through the exact same thing. I think our kids that graduate in Illinois and Florida, we have a 95% graduation rate in our villages. These are foster care kids who've gone through horrendous things already in their life, and a lot of them have already been through the foster care system, so they've already been in 6, 7, 8 homes by the time they get to us. So again, it's that safety, security, a continuous caregiver, somebody who really loves them and takes care of them and wants to help them figure out what they want to be in life. I think there's a secret sauce in there somewhere that makes our foster care model very different than what we have in this country, and to be honest, what's facing a lot of countries now. So some of the work that we're trying to do in some countries is expanding outside of the villages, providing foster care parents with SOS training, so that we'll have a village, but then we'll also have foster care parents out in the community who've kind of received that extra training and know that there's a support service of people who are really willing to help them and to be there for them. And we'll test that out a little bit.
So we're just about out of time. I'd like to actually finish with each of you and ask you just for briefly your advice for people who are working already with vulnerable children who want to support the work. And maybe start with you, George.
Well, I'll just give you a quick little anecdote, and I think it's worth all of us keeping in mind because we saw kind of the faces and the excitement and the hope that was in the video. But we used to use the tagline for the benefit of vulnerable children, and we were getting ready to open our first school, and we were all hands were on deck to clean things up and get things ready. And all of a sudden, I could hear one of the future students start to sound out what was on the back of my T-shirt. And so she started reading for the benefit, and then I kind of clinched up because I knew what was coming next. And I think we really need to be careful sometimes when we think about how we refer to the populations that we serve, because it's super important that we give them the dignity and realize that there could be another Dr. Muli in our presence. And I don't see anything vulnerable about that.
Great. Lynn?
Yeah, I think that's very true. As I said, a lot of our kids feel like they're the lucky ones. We recently went on a trip to Haiti with some of our board members, and a lot of our board members brought their kids, which was a really cool experience for me to be able to see Haiti through 10, 11, 12-year-old girls' eyes. And we went to the village, and we always bring soccer balls because that's the best way to talk to kids. And it's amazing how that language carries everybody, and they're playing together and having a great time. And we get back in the bus, and we're leaving, and our board member asked his daughter, what did you think? And she said, well, I was really surprised because I expected to see kids who are really sad and crying and not happy. And he said, but they're not. And she said, no, they were smiling, they were happy, they were laughing. And he said, well, do you know why? And she said, yeah, because they're safe, they're loved. They really do feel like they've won the lottery. And so I agree with you. they don't feel like the poor people. They feel like citizens. They feel like they got lucky, and all of our kids that I've met all want to give back because of that. And I think, given everything we've heard this week in CGI, if we were to treat more of the children like that, especially the refugee children right now, which we're working with, if we can do that more now, maybe we'll have less of this later.
Charles, any final advice for our group here?
Yes, it just to encourage any person, individual, organization that it is the battle is on, and therefore we all need to prepare ourselves fully as we move forward to rescue the most vulnerable children, women, and street mothers. And the other thing is about the model that we have put in place is going to villages, communities, and then we offer water in that community, build a school in that community, supply teachers in that community, and they give children free meal every day, and that makes them to be happy, and that changes the attitude of their learning because they have all those things available. So that is one of the model connected to the main one where we have the children's being rehabilitated in one place or different places. So I just wanted to share with you. Finally, is to say thank you so much.
Great. So in the film, we learned that your trademark with introducing yourself to the kids is to say "Ho-wei." Is that right? Is now an appropriate moment to say that to everyone?
That means shalom, for those who understand the word shalom, but it means peace. Oi. Then please can you respond, oi, oi.
Ho-wei.
That the greeting when I go to the street or to the people when they cannot listen to say hello or saying, how are you? Then they'll listen, oi, and then they pay attention.
Thank you, and we'll close on that. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.